Alright, you guys, they just told me I'm here to charge. I didn't know that, so come have a seat. I lowballed Mr. Chris. I don't know if you have a seat, but you guys turned out. Come on in and fill them up. When I set this up with Mr. Chris, he said, how many are you going to have? And I said, well, I'd hope for 30, but we'll probably have 20. And now we're overfilling the seats, so it's good to have you guys here. And I don't know why I'm in charge, really. I've asked Mr. Press, the district superintendent, to give us an update. 2 years ago, when did we pass the bond? 2 years ago?
March of 21.
March of 21. The bond for the BPAC, the auditorium over there, was retiring. We looked around and saw a need for, and I'll just take a minute and tell you how I got here. I was asked to be on a grassroots committee to look at a bond where that one was retired.
He was asking you all how he got in charge of this. This is how he got in charge of the bond project.
I got in charge of that too. But we went to a couple of meetings. There were people from Sputnik, there was people from Premier, there were people from out there. And in that meeting, they were talking about the lack of skilled labor that they didn't have. And the statement was made from Premier, I'm trying to hire welders every day and I can't find them. And so kind of being that realm in my life, as I was walking out with the principal of the high school and Mr. Chapman, the former welding teacher. And they were walking, I said, can I ask you a question? Because I was totally uninformed. They said, yeah. And I said, how many kids do you have in the welding program? And he said, well, the welding teacher said, well, let me tell you this. He said, for this upcoming semester, I had to turn away 80 kids.
Oh, wow.
And something clicked in my head, and I said, there's people trying to hire welders at the kind of pay scale they're paying, and we've got 80 kids that wanted to be in a welding class, and you don't have room for them. So I jumped on board with a bond that was called the BTEC, the Blackfoot Technical Education Center bond. It was basically the same amount of money that was bonded for the BPAC. There would not be an increase in taxes, and we could, at that time, and this is a whole series of meetings that we went through, Stoddard Elementary was in need of some
I think it was
upgrades.
Southgate for y'all.
It was Southgate.
Southgate originally, Stoddard Elementary was in need of some big upgrades. The school was undersized. The idea was to turn Stoddard Southgate Elementary into a technical education center and build a new elementary. And in order to do that, a lot of things had to happen, and Mr. Kress will take over now, because I've talked way too long.
Welcome, my friends. I am so glad that you decided to trim your nose hairs and yank on your Spanx and come to the class reunion. The Blackfoot High School class of 1969 never disappoints. We are so happy to see so many of you back to celebrate our longevity. I feel like it is a tribute to this special time and place in our lives. I know that I'm grateful that I'm still here to reconnect with so many of you and to see so many of you that I follow on Facebook. We are lucky that we have a reunion committee that are so good at what they do. The time they spend looking for people, sending invites, preparing programs, making treats, and gathering money, which, by the way, is no small feat, they are always excited but not surprised by the generosity of our classmates. We know Ron is taking good care of the money. In fact, Nancy was telling me that when she gets the money, she puts it on her credenza. And then when she gets a stack, she'll pick it up and take it over to Ron's house and go to the door with it. He will answer. She will give him the money and he will hand it to a small grandchild and say, go put this on the piano. And then eventually it makes it to the bank. Am I right, Ron?
You got it.
Okay, so I'm wondering at this moment, if your flip phone can download Venmo.
No. I do get tips.
So it might be a thought. Venmo is pretty easy. Okay, so here we are 5 years down the road from our last reunion, and sadly we have 8 class members who have passed on to what I am sure is a better place. We will share the video that Harold Hendricks helps, keep up to date, and we are fortunate that we also have that wall board over there that Deborah Harris keeps up to date for us. These two are pretty amazing at doing what they do, and we are so lucky that we have them as classmates. As a side note, I would like to announce that if any of you know of a passing of a classmate, if you would be sure to make sure that Harold gets that information or that Deborah gets that information, it would help us a lot. It would help us a lot in keeping up. You may have noticed a sheet of paper on the table entitled Table Talk. And after dinner, we will have you share anything that you feel compelled to share with us. It will be a fun way for us to get to know each other better. For example, at the last reunion, I told the story about Jim Edison being kicked out of class. Well, now I can tell you that Jim Edison has written a book. And the title is How to Skin a Nog, N-A-U-G. I don't know what that means, but you can check this out on AmazonBooks.com and order it or read about it. And it's pretty amazing to think of our classmate, Jim Edison, writing this book. So I have another question for you, Ron. Have you ever ordered anything off of Amazon?
Yeah, I got a pair of boots today.
Oh, I'm amazed. So happy to hear that. So now we will go ahead and enjoy our dinner, and we will ask Steve Krogh if he will give us a blessing on the food.
The food is set up out in the hall, and so what we'll do is go table by table. So why don't you have these tables go? So what we're going to do is everybody has a table top on the table. So we are going to, you stand up if you have something that you want to share. You stand up, and we will make sure that you get a microphone. Don't start. But first, do you have anything you want to share?
I think my favorite teacher of all was Hugh Owens. And he would be very proud of me because I became an engineer and he didn't think I'd ever learn geometry. But my favorite story to him, and I can tell this now because we've been out of school for 50 years, is somehow somebody ended up with a pad of excuses from Mr. Ramsdale's office. Blank. And I could copy his signature perfectly. So I'll come the next morning, I'd show up in homeroom, which was Mr. Owens' class. I'd already had my excuse all filled out and made out. He said, Mr. Elison, you got an excuse for yesterday? I said, yes, I do, and I couldn't find it. So there it was one right here on the desk. I picked it up, I went up there, and I handed it to him. Would you like to come back and get it and fill it out? I took him a blank.
Okay, just stand up if you have a story that you want to share. And Colleen, do you want to get the basket? You have a little basket. If you share, you get a treat. So who's first?
I got a story. One more story.
Oh, good. Do it.
I've been following John Little on Facebook. And I seen today that he was sitting at Tommy Bond's killing time and having a beer. And I'm sitting at the hitching post killing time having a beer. The only difference is where we go. And I seen the other day, the other thing that we have in common is we're old, tired, and stay off our damn grass.
I missed school, he evidently was late that morning, and he went down to Ted Ramsdale, and we used to have to go down there and get an excuse before we get back in class. Well, Greg Richardson, who was ahead of me, and well, Ted said, well, Craig, he says, what's your excuse? And he says, well, I got this, and he handed me the slip of paper and everything. And Ted looked at it, and he said, well, is this legitimate? And he says, sure, it's legitimate. And he says, well, who wrote it? He says, well, I did. So, anyway, Ted just looked at it. Of course, if you knew Greg, his parents were overrunning the restaurant early in the morning, so if he got up late, he usually wrote his own excuses. So anyway, that was always the way Greg was.
Okay, John Cunningham.
This involves famous people. My part of it was he was talking on stage, and he wanted everybody to yell, scream. So I did a Tarzan yell, and he said, yeah, that sounds really good. Well, this famous person, and I will announce who it is, came down and sat next to my wife and started talking to her, and his name was Robin Williams.
All right, who's going to be next? You know, I decided that I needed to work on myself a little bit, and 4 minutes into my run, I decided I'd start working on my personality instead.
So you might remember Marcia Johnston.
Yeah.
We had a tendency to travel together and, you know, whatever one did, the other did. Anyway, one day, it was in the winter, I had come to school and parked my folks' little ranchero right in front of the seminary, and you might remember that the road went down like this, and so I was parked on ice. Well, we decided to skip art class. What was that art teacher's name? Jackman, yeah, Mr. Jackman. We decided to skip his class. So we skipped out, and I'm in the driver's seat, and Marcia is pushing because I can't get traction. And all of a sudden, she looks up and she just drops her head and stops pushing, and I'm going, well, what's wrong? And she said, look, and turned around, and here was Mr. Farron and the school secretary and Ted Ramsdale watching us try to push the car out. But anyway, we got it out and we left anyway. But when I got home, my mother had a few things to say to me. That was it. By the way, Marcia passed away on about June 29th this year.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Marcia. That car business reminded me of that. My folks had a blue Cadillac. It was one of those big long ones, you know, those old style. And so whenever my dad would let me take it, I would take it. And of course, I took it and parked it in Humpty Stop, because that's what you did. Then I got the car and went with some friends. And I came back and my car was gone. And someone, to this day, I don't know who, pushed out in the middle of the dang road. And there it was, crosswise in the middle of the road. So I just left it there and went home. And the next morning, my dad said, Colleen, where's the car? Well, did I have a car?
I don't know what we were doing that night, but
Can't imagine.
I didn't remember the call.
One of my favorite teachers was Lamar Hager. And took, government class from him and all that. I also took driver's training from him. And at the time I took driver's training, I'd already been driving spud trucks, hauling hay. And I thought I was a pretty good groovy dude, so I was only there just so I could get my license. When it came time to go out and do the first drive, we got in the car. Back in them days, we didn't have shoulder straps, we just had belt straps. He got in there, I went through the checkpoint and everything, I put that car in reverse, spun out of the driveway, drove it in the drive, and just as I came out of the parking lot of the high school, Lamar Hager threw me through the windshield with a brake. And he said, that ain't how we do this. And he made me back it up and repark it, and we had to start all over. And then, of course, he was at the golf course, and when I retired and started playing golf out there all the time, he always had to tell everybody how I turned out to be a professional driver, because he taught me how to drive.
Most of you missed this in senior year of high school. But how many band members do we have besides me?
Band members, stand up.
We all played the band.
Under Bruce Fable?
I wanted to.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
All right, I wanted to tell you about the time that we made Bruce Fable, our band director, almost wet his pants. The final concert of the year is a big thing. We worked really hard on this super great musical piece, although I can't remember what it was. And we had arranged beforehand. So when Bruce Fable got up there, and most of you know who he was, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, now just picture this in your mind. He comes up, comes down like this, and nobody played. And do you remember how he looked when he went up and just like, pure panic in his voice. He didn't say a thing. And then we went up to get him a gift and stuff like that. And then he tried again, and he was kind of like, "You're gonna do it this time," but we did. But that's one of my favorite memories. Yeah.
Any consequences to that move?
It was too late.
Oh.
Well, you're funny, so I got a little story. Back in high school, and after basketball practice, when everybody's in the shower, Greg High and Dave Madsen. Wait a minute, I can't tell that story. I'll come up with a middle.
Okay, anybody else?
No, I want to hear that story.
Okay, I think this might be interesting about me. I've been skydiving twice. Has anybody been skydiving?
No, we got great.
I remember when I went there and I went past a window that was leasing out the small planes. He goes, "Why would anyone jump out of a perfectly good airplane?" I don't know, but I did, and it was fun.
Who even is Mrs. Natalie?
Oh.
Wasn't it our crew that gave her the sex test? I don't think she ever came back. She never came back. But you know what? What goes around comes around. Because later on, I'm going up to Snake River High School to run errands for one of my wayward children. And there's Mrs. Natalie. And I just want to lay my hand in shame. Because I knew she'd remember me.
You know, if she remembered you, she was just lovely and nice.
She was the sweetest lady, but we left her. She
Well, we
left the
were
classroom crying. And what was that stupid sex test? What was it? Do you remember that?
The sex test was like,
Or was it, were we just passing nasty
it
notes?
was, we were just naughty.
We were just mean. Well, not me, but you.
But I have.
You have one?
We got one on the Ron.
I got it.
Ron, you can.
Okay, Ron, you
You've probably all heard way too much from me, but we were talking at the table and you said, oh, you gotta tell that, you gotta tell that. But before I do that, I'd just like to ask, how many original members of Ronnie Rattlesnake and the Reptiles are here? And please stand up.
Where are you? Come on, you.
My, yes.
Wasn't it Wesley LePew? Wesley LePew. Wesley LePew. Shirley I would.
Either Chuck Wagon or Bob Wire or Tim Chu, I don't really know.
I was trying to forget that.
That was,
We were good.
I got a lot of trouble at home over that one, guys. Because back in the day, they had exchange assemblies that were really legitimate talent groups. That would really, yeah, okay, come on, Shirley. I mean, you would have people like Harold Hendricks who would practice for hours on a piano number. You would have the sextets who could really, really sing. You had people who were really talented. And some guy put together a group with one really good singer and musician, Carmen Hernandez.
What a good voice.
I remember her and then we put together this group who we would travel around to the different schools that would put on legitimate talent presentations. And then Ronnie Rattlesnake and the Reptiles would get up and perform Rye Whiskey and
They're gonna put me in the movies.
Folsom Prison Blues.
Petunia is a flower like Begonia.
Yeah, and it just wasn't really legitimate. But one of the best memories I remember, and Dennis, this might be true to your heart. Do you remember Chris McCarley?
Yeah.
Dennis's wife, Chrissy, was had a miniskirt that hit her about this high back in 1969.
She looked good in it too.
And had a set of wheels. And she would come in, remember the old boxing matches where they would have the card girls? She'd come out and would introduce us. And there were a lot of other schools who were reported to the superintendent of Blackfoot School District that probably wasn't appropriate, and my mother being the superintendent secretary got home to me. But we continued to perform, and I think we did pretty good. We had a lot of fun, right? Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did pretty good.
And I think, I don't know, but I think we're probably the only group there that they requested an additional song or performance from, because the crowd went nuts when Chris come out with their part. The other story and a real quick one, the other story that just to tell you how things have changed. When we were sophomores, Don Beck, Dave Neal, and I all took driver's training together. And we had driver's training from Art Gardner. And we were all playing football. And so you had a hard time getting your drives in. And I remember we had to take a long drive. And I remember that Art Gardner, it was football Friday night, and he said, listen, Saturday, you guys got to show up really early. And he said, but I want you to bring your shotguns. He said, Saturday's the opening day of pheasant season. It opens at noon. And he said, we're going to drive to Springfield. We're going to hunt pheasants. We got out there. I think we all got our limit. Hunted pheasants, put them in the back of the driver training car with our shotguns and come back. That's a legitimate story.
That's a great story.
I would often tell my mother that I was going to Humpty's Stone, just drive around Humpty's Stone. And very often I would go to Pocatello to see my boyfriend. And I had to be quick about it, and I never was quick about it. And once I went to Pocatello and I was late getting home. So I started to speed. And on the way home, were you with me, Randy?
Uh-huh.
Marcy?
I was mad at you.
Well, she was always
I said,
mad.
you're going too fast.
No, but there was more than one time where you were speeding on the freeway. The time you got picked up going 90 miles an hour.
Oh, no, this time it was 110 miles an
No,
hour.
it was 110.
Yeah. So I was a child with no brain, and I was going 110 miles an hour. I got pulled over, and the officer was very upset with me and sent me on my way. And I just didn't want to tell my mother about it. And I finally had to go to, well, I finally,
She saw it in the newspaper.
no, she didn't.
Yes, she did.
Well, anyway, I'm not going to prolong the story. I just want you to know that I did get into trouble, and I lost my license, and this is where I was headed with it. I'm old and I didn't know where I was headed, but now I know where I'm going. Mr. Ramsdale, bless his heart, I worked in his office, and he put up a great big chart of the fact that I had lost my license, and I lost it for 42 days. When I lost my license, my new Mustang was in getting painted, and my Mustang was ready to get out, and I was going to have it, and I couldn't have the Mustang because it was, it was in hog. I couldn't get it. So Mr. Ramsdale put up the chart, and every day he would ceremoniously tear down a page and let the world see 41 more days until Nancy gets the Mustang. 40 more days until Nancy gets the Mustang. And I thought it was awfully kind of Mr. Ramsdale to do that for me. He also, I had a nickname, and he also had the sign above the chart. Mr. Ramsdale was very, very kind to me, but he wasn't nice to me.
I gotta finish this story. I gotta finish this story. Now, Nancy didn't get the Mustang, but Marcy lived at Nancy's house. And Marcy had to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to take Nancy to work in her Mustang. So I got to drive the Mustang. Any place Nancy went, guess who got to drive the Mustang? It was me.
He was awful.
It was awful for Nancy, but I'd have to get up and take her to work. And at that point in time, Nancy and I had these University of Idaho football jerseys that we wore.
Do not go any further.
We wore them as nightgowns. Of course, they came right here. And being the wonderful friend that I was to Nancy, I wore my football jersey in the Mustang to take her to work. Well, we were driving to work one morning, and we had the windows down. A bee flew in. A bee flew in the car. So I quickly put the car in park, jumped out of the Mustang. Nancy, of course, didn't have her football jersey on. I did. In the middle of town, I'm standing at the side of the road, jumping up and down in my football jersey for somebody to get this bee out of the car. But I did get to drive the Mustang.
That reminds me, you know how to tell if you're from a small town? When your Friday night consisted of dragging Maine around Humpty's Dump and back around the parks. Steve.
Well, I've been waiting for better part of 56 years to unburden my soul. I think I was probably looked upon as kind of a goody two-shoes in high school. Maybe a student, either of which were exactly true, but I need to apologize to you, Colleen.
Oh, really?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you're forgiven.
Well, you need to hear why first. I was the president of Key Club, and one of the things Key Club did was sponsor a dance, and it was the Thanksgiving dance. And where's Diane? Hi, Diane. I had the opportunity to count the votes, and I had had a crush on Diane my whole high school career. As it turns out, I think half of the students, male students in our class, had the same crush that I did. So even though Colleen finished 2 votes ahead of Diane, Diane won. Sorry. Diane was the Miss Turkey Trot and not Colleen that you should have been. I'm sorry.
I got a story about Peggy Joe. I remember a football game one night, Friday night of the football game, I'm sitting there and I seen Peggy Joe and an anonymous, yet to be determined young man slip behind the bleachers.
Oh,
No way, they can't tell that story.
I could tell one on him.
It was a good one though.
Senior year, I'm sitting in government class at last hour of the day. Clay Homer is the teacher, and he says to me, Colleen, who's taking the homecoming queen to the dance? And I said, my brother, who was about this short. He said, your brother? I said, no, no, Dan. So he made Dennis take me.
It was really a tough job.
Somebody had to do it, right?
So it was mentioned earlier about great. So that brought back a memory 14 years ago. So 14 years ago, I came to town. Hadn't been here for a long time. Drove into town and it was about lunchtime and I thought, I'll get something to eat. So I went to Sam's Grill. Still says Sam's Grill. But I knew he was Sam's yesterday. And so I walked in and I sat down. And they came in, the waitress came in over and I said, I'd like to speak to the manager, please. So she goes out. And they have those doors with the windows. And I saw the cooking staff look out at me. And the waitress looks out at me. And then after about 10 minutes, here comes Greg. So Greg comes up and looks at me and looks at me. He goes, I understand that you want to buy a restaurant. And I said, well, I was told this was the best restaurant in town. And he says, well, I am kind of interested in selling. And I said, well, Greg, you don't remember me? He looks at me and he says, yeah, I think you're in my senior class. And I said, yes. And he says, give me a clue. I said, my name starts with H. And he goes, oh, I know. Harold Hendricks.
When we were in high school, we had an awesome amount of rabbits out on the desert. And some of the greatest hunting trips you could ever go on in your spotlight. And one night, Dave Neal, myself, Marlon Olson, and Brad Burrup, who was a couple years behind us, he had his dad's truck. We went out on the desert, and of course, back in those days, you got a nickel a rabbit. The farmer usually bought your shells and paid for your gas. So I mean, you could make some pretty good money doing that. So Friday and Saturday night, that's what we did. Instead of going on dates. At any rate, we were out one night. Of course, Dave Neal's dad worked for Idaho Power. And we went out. Occasionally you get, you're shooting the spotlight, you're seeing 2 eyes out there, and you start shooting at it. And sometimes there were things on the power lines. And Arlen had a semi-automatic, and he'd go through everybody's shells because he'd hold on that trigger. Couldn't hit a broadside of a barn, but he'd just keep shooting. One night we were out there and he shot a transformer. And it blew up. And so we get back into town and Dave's dad, was loading up. He's headed out. He's a lineman. And he goes out, spends all night out there, change the transformer out, all these bullet holes in it. And he knew we'd been out hunting. So when I went over to Dave's place, Dave had already been interrogated. I was interrogated, and we ended up paying a few dollars for that. But that's kind of a story. We have a lot of stories like that. So,
But did you leave the rabbits on the step of the school? You never got
well, not so much on Blackfoot, but Snake River, they want the. We had a truckload one time, and we were going into town. We thought we'd throw them mailboxes, but we decided not to do that since you get federal charges for that. So we got to Snake River and says, "Oh, let's get up on the school and fill up their chimney." So we did that. 352 rabbits. Needless to say, they had a hard time getting that smell.
I'm surprised nobody has any water baby story.
Those would be some more we can't finish.
Oh, okay. You know, women mature much faster than men. We get our boobs at 14, and men don't get theirs till 45.
I live up in Shoshone, Idaho, and of course, we have a lot of Nez tribal members. I've become pretty good friends with them. I came to church one day, and I was getting in the late fall, and one of the guys asked him, he says, most of your Indians know whether we're going to have a bad year or a good year. He says, what kind of year are we going to have? And he says, well, I think we're going to have a bad year. And so, well, how do you know that? He says, well, my neighbor next door, the white guy, he's got 10 cords of ropes, cut and stack. So it's going to be a cold year.